In this video, I'm going to tell two stories. One story is what happened to me back in the day when I got shot and my brother was killed. And in parallel to this story, I'm going to tell the story of the South African citizen, because I believe that the South African citizen is in pretty much the same situation than what I was. And as I'm telling my story, I'm going to draw certain connections between the two stories. And at the end of the story, I want to make a suggestion. And it's something that I believe that if I did that, I might have been able to save my brother's life. And I believe that if we as South African citizens do the same, we may be able to turn the story of South Africa into a beautiful story and save us from much more pain. So Sunday, the 6th of December, 1992, my mom called us to prepare and get ready for church, but we were all up late the night before because we had family and friends over. So my younger brother and I said, "Mom, please, can we stay home? We're tired and we want to fix our room and whatever." Now, normally on a Sunday, it was non-negotiable. It's church day. But that day, she said, "Okay, it's fine. Just keep the doors locked." And just before they left, my sister called me and she wrote a number on a piece of paper next to the phone and said to me, "Andres, if anything happens, just call this number." Moments after they left, we heard the dog barking outside. As the dog started to bark, we knew that something wasn't right. And when we look at a South African citizen, there's people shouting and making noise and saying, "Watch out, there's disaster coming towards South Africa." It's almost like the first line of defense where people say, "Watch out, things are coming towards us." But just like my brother and I, we stood there basically paralyzed. We didn't know what to do. The next moment, we heard loud footsteps running towards the house and then around the house. And we heard someone slamming into the back door, trying to open it. And we stood in our room. It wasn't far from that door. And we could hear the noise, and I immediately recognized the sound. I realized that he wasn't trying to break the door open. He was actually shaking the door the way that we used to shake the door when we tried to get in from outside. So we always had a spare key hidden outside, that if you got home and there were no one there, or if you got locked out somehow, you would go and find the spare key. Then you would go to the door and shake it until the key on the inside turns, so that you can actually push it out from the outside with the spare key to open it up. So I could hear that he was shaking the door and then tried to put in a key, shaking and putting in a key. So at that point, I knew that it was just a matter of time before the door is open and we need to do something. As we stood in the doorway of our room, just across the hallway was the kitchen and just around the corner was the door. So in my mind, there were two safe spaces. One was in the study. So the study was where my sister wrote down the number. The quickest way to get to the study was going across the hallway through the side of the kitchen, but there was a window next to the door where the person was shaking the door. So I knew that there's a possibility that if we run past here, he may be able to see us. So I thought another safe space was upstairs in my parents' room, where I knew where my dad's firearm was. So I led my brother towards my parents' room and I thought, I'm going to protect my brother today. So we went upstairs. I ran to my dad's closet, and I remember running upstairs. You could hear that sound. It was terrifying. My legs were shaking. So I ran to my dad's cupboard. I took his .38 special revolver. So back in that time, farm attacks and farm murders were happening all over. So my parents slept with firearms next to their bed, and when they left the house, they would hide the firearms someplace, oftentimes in the closet, in case we need to protect ourselves. And as I stood with that .38 special revolver in my hand, we heard the most frightening, most scary sound ever up to that point. We heard the sound of that key dropping. Person came through the door. He ran through the kitchen towards the stairs and then started running upstairs. So my mind went absolutely crazy, and I stood there, and that's when I realized that I have a gun in my hand and I'm not ready to kill someone. I don't know who it is, I don't know what they want, so maybe I can negotiate my way through it. So I thought, let me rather put the gun down and just see what's going on. I can always grab it again. And literally I put it down behind the open door, and as I stepped back, he burst through the door, came into the room. And I remember my brother and I looked at him and we recognized him. And I said to him, "Willem, wat doen jy hier?" This is the guy that my parents helped. He had no place to stay. He had no income. So my parents were wonderful Christians, and they always helped wherever they could. And they gave him a place to stay, and then he started helping on the farm, and my dad started giving him jobs, and he started earning a salary. But then he stole from my parents, and instead of calling the police at the time, he just told him, "Listen here, this is not working, go find another job. He came back a year or two later begging for another job, and he said, please forgive me, I'm sorry about it, I will never do it again. And my parents were wonderful Christians again. They forgave him and they gave him another chance. I thought to myself, there's no way this guy will harm us, so it's okay, we can just talk our way through this. This is a point where I want to join the stories again. The South African citizen has certain barriers in place, like the door. The barrier was there to protect us. So the Constitution, with its Bill of Rights, is a barrier that's designed to protect our human rights. It's supposed to protect the citizens of South Africa from a possible repeat of apartheid. It's supposed to protect the citizens of South Africa from a possibly corrupt or destructive government by holding the government accountable for certain things. But for the past few years, the government has been shaking those doors, has been shaking that barrier, trying to change the constitution. They're talking about nationalization of all the mines of businesses, nationalization of all the banks. They're talking about nationalization of the health system, and grabbing land. They're trying to push the key that we have on the inside that's supposed to protect us. They're trying to push that key out so that they can get free reign, full access, uncontrolled power over us. Now, many South African citizens are in the same position as we were when we looked at this guy. We recognize him. You look at the political parties that are shaking these doors and are breaking through these barriers, and you think to yourself, well, I trust these political leaders. They saved us from the evil apartheid. So, they did something wonderful and great, and we are grateful, so we trust them. And you think to yourself, they won't hurt us, so maybe if they expropriate all the land, maybe they will remember about me. They will, they will share their wealth with me. Maybe, if they expropriate the mines and the banks, maybe we can actually win from that. So they trust him. But what happened to me is that guy looked at us and then he ran straight past us towards my dad's closet, ripped out all the clothes and things, and then he grabbed my dad's shotgun. So he took the shotgun, he pointed it straight to us, and as I stared into that double barrel shotgun, I knew that it was game over. And from that point onwards, he literally shoved us through the house like we were slaves. We couldn't resist, we had absolutely no defense. And in the same way, if the government gets absolute power, and they manage to get that absolute power, and they control all the land, all the businesses, all the banks and everything, it will be like giving a shotgun to a little boy. It will be absolute chaos. And if you think that leaders will become better people once they have absolute power, then you better start reading up on history. Leaders with absolute power will take advantage of it, and the citizens will suffer the most. He said to me, I want guns. So we led him downstairs to my dad's safe where he had his hunting rifles, and then he said to me, no, he wants a small gun. So we went upstairs again, and as we got to the top of the stairs, we suddenly heard this loud bang. So he pulled the trigger of the shotgun and he fired a hole into the wall right next to me, literally millimeters away from my arm. And I remember the dust and all the pieces of plaster burst into my face, into my eyes, and the bullets of the shotgun splattered into the wall down the hallway in front of us. And at this point, we turned towards him and we both started to cry. And I said, Willem, please don't shoot us. And he pushed the gun against my chest and he said to me, hurry up, I'm reloading it. So I took him around the corner and I showed him the gun. And as he picked up the gun, I knew that that was the last line of defense. We had nothing left to defend ourselves. We just had to hope and pray that he will not hurt us. As soon as he had all the power, he said, now I want money. We led him downstairs towards my dad's study where he had like a little money box, and I knew normally there was cash in there. So he picked up the box, put it down on the desk, and he went through it, and then he turned around and he literally pointed the gun to my brother right next to me, and he pulled the trigger. He shot him, and I watched my brother fall to the ground, and then I looked at this man. He pointed the gun straight to me, and I knew it was coming. It was the most frightening experience because I just saw my brother fall down. I knew the power of firearms, and I just braced for the shot, and it was like a truck hit me, and I fell back, and the pain was excruciating. The noise was, it was about 1 meter away from us, so my ears were ringing. There was still dust in my eyes. It was terrifying. And as I fell onto the ground, I rolled around and I thought I was going to die. And I remember looking at the guy running out the door, and I looked at my brother. He was also rolling around, making noises. And when the guy was out, I called to my brother. I said, Johan. I rolled around, and it was a few seconds, maybe a minute or so, until he stopped rolling around. And I realized, okay, well, it seems like he's dead. I wanted to get up on my feet then, but my entire lower body was completely numb, so I couldn't get on my feet. But I crawled to the chair, managed to get up onto the chair, and my legs started to get alive again. But then I picked up the phone and I read the number, and the incredible thing is, I read the number once, and I could remember that same number for years afterwards. It's almost as if I took a mental picture of that number, because I was so scared at the time, because I knew the guy can come back. So I need to dial that number as quickly as possible. And luckily he answered. And I said, Oom Koos, please help us, we've been shot. Then I put the phone down and I looked at my brother lying there. It was a terrible sight, and I knew that I can possibly still die. So I walked out towards my room and I went to lay in my bed, and that's the point where I picked up my shirt and I looked at the mark, and I was quite surprised at how small it was, and there was a piece of meat hanging out of it. But the pain was just absolutely excruciating. Eventually, he came through the door, he called us, Andries, Johan, where are you guys? And I answered, and he came in, asked me what happened, and then he called the cops. My parents were in church, there were no cell phones at the time, so he had to call someone to go call my parents in church. And he tells them, listen guys, you got to be strong. Someone broke into your house and fired shots. Please brace yourself. As they pulled into the driveway at home, there were police cars already. And I remember lying on my bed, people started coming into the room. A police officer came in, said to me, what happened? Who did it? What's the name? What can you remember? And wrote everything down. And I remember at one point, it was absolute chaos. I could hear my mom and dad screaming in the house. And you can just imagine, you walk in on your child who's lying there on the floor in blood. Eventually they loaded me onto a gurney and into a helicopter, because they couldn't transport me. They didn't know where the bullet was. So they couldn't transport me by road. So they flew me to the hospital, and I remember being pushed into the hospital, and one nurse said to me, this injection is going to burn a little bit, but just relax and calm down. And then everything faded to black. This seems like the end of the story, but the story actually continues, and a new story starts, because as I was in hospital fighting for my life, my parents made turns to sleep on the chair right next to me every day until the day of the funeral. That morning I woke up and there was no one there. And I remember spending most of the day alone, and that was the first time when I started to feel guilty. I imagined my family standing around the grave, crying, and I thought to myself, Andries, you coward. You had the gun in your hand. You could have been a hero. You could have saved your brother's life. Now you are this coward that's lying here in hospital while your family is standing around your brother's grave, and they are broken, and you could have saved him. Why didn't you just pull that trigger? Why did you put it down? And all the regret started to work through me. What I didn't know at the time is that my sister stood next to that grave thinking to herself, she had this gut feeling in the morning, why didn't she do more about it? My older brother stood there thinking to himself, man, I should have been there. I wish I was home, because if I was there, I could have saved them. And my mom and dad, you can just imagine what went through their minds. I mean, as they stood there, all the things, I should have done it, we shouldn't have left them, we must have done this, why did we do this, why this, why that? And we all felt so guilty for something we didn't plan, we didn't cause, we didn't create, we didn't want. Regret is a terrible thing. What if one day we stand around the grave of South Africa and we look at the mess and we think to ourselves, I should have done that, I could have done that, why didn't we do that? So over the years, I've played out several different scenarios or things that I could have done or should have done. One of the scenarios is where I actually stood with the gun and I saved my brother's life, the hero. But obviously, later in life, I realized that scenario might have been even worse, because it was right at the end of the apartheid era. So now imagine this guy, although he's made threats before, up to that point, he has never killed anyone, so he was innocent. We didn't know what he was capable of, so if I defended ourselves there and I shot him, I would have killed an innocent person. So I would have had the mark or the stigma over me, the reputation of being a killer, a murderer. And it happened right at the end of apartheid. So imagine a 10-year-old white Afrikaans boy killing a black, innocent, unarmed person. It would have destroyed our family. The outcome of that, the results of that would never have been good. So now, to tie into the story of South Africa, I see many South African citizens, black and white, calling for war and saying, black people saying, honeymoon is over, let's fight, let's kill all these whites. I see white people saying that, if the government comes for me and my house, I will defend myself, we will make war. But the reality is, It's not that easy. In theory, it sounds so easy. You know, we go to war, we fight, we win the war, and we all live happily ever after. But at the end of the day, the thing that we actually want to fight for will be destroyed in the process. So if a civil war breaks out, no person alive today will ever have a normal life, because this country will go up in flames, and it will take generations to heal this country. So making war and fighting is just not an option. So what's the other option? And there's one more scenario that I think would have been an answer for us. So if we moved, instead of going for arms, instead of trying to protect ourselves and, you know, being brave and being the hero, if I led my brother towards the study where that number was, we could have locked ourselves in that room, called for help, and that might have given us enough time for help to arrive. And that could have saved my brother's life. If the South African citizen, we need to call for backup, but who do we call and where do we go to? Because there's no one outside of South Africa, no other country is going to save us. And that's where this comes in. And that's where I believe we need to start calling on our neighbors. We need to unite against black and white, or against the narrative of black and white. We need to unite black and white together and say, let's stop hating each other. We need to realize that the enemy is not the black guy next to me. The enemy is not the white guy next to me. We need to call on each other. If we can unite, we can actually build a beautiful country. So let's forget about being brave and being heroes and picking up arms and, you know, standing up. Why don't we just stand together? If I can have one more chance to lead my brother to safety, I will do whatever it takes. But I don't have that chance. I never had that opportunity again. And I know that stepping out and doing this and putting out this video, it's scary, it's frightening, and it's risky. But I know I don't want a repeat of what happened that day.